creeps! Andy here, and today I wanted to talk about my favorite horror books that I read in 2021. We're a little late, but it's okay, let's just move on past that. So these are, just so you know, not horror books that came out in 2021, but horror books that I read in 2021, just so you are aware. So I did one of these in October, and these are the books that I mentioned. I'm not going to go too into detail on these because I have a whole nother list of books that I want to share with you, but I'm going to leave that video linked down below so you guys can watch that video if you guys want more information on these books, but I'm going to just rapid fire show you these in case you've seen that video. The first one was The Ruins, fantastic novel. It's about a group of people that go to Mexico, they go on the ruins and they're unable to leave. American Psycho, I think everybody knows what this book is. It's quite a controversial one, but I loved it when I read it this year. I've read it a few times, but this year it really blew me away. This one, Joyce Carol Oates' Zombie. One of you said that it was, I think it was based off of Jeffrey Dahmer or something like that. And I recently watched a documentary on him, and it for sure is. So it's written as like the journal of a serial killer. Very creepy, disturbing, highly recommend. Next one, Monsters in Our Midst. This one is edited by Robert Bloch, the writer of Psycho, not American Psycho. And this one is just a bunch of short stories that the narrator of the story is the antagonist of the story. So fantastic book there. The last one is Reviver. This one is about a man who revives people that have been killed so that they can explain who hurt them, and then they can record it and use it in their trials. All fantastic books, and if you guys haven't watched my last video, I highly recommend, because those are definitely some fantastic books that I read this year. Let's just get into the other ones because I have quite a bit. These are in no particular order. They're not in the order I read them or anything. I'm just gonna pick them up and talk about them. So this one is Clive Barker's Cabal. If you guys have seen the movie Nightbreed, it is based off of this book, and it's about a man named Boone who is going to a psychiatrist or a therapist, whatever, and he learns that he's done these terrible things, but he doesn't remember committing any of the crimes. So basically he feels like he doesn't belong in this world, and he goes out in search of these underground monster people called the Nightbreed, and he tries to convince him that he's one of them. His girlfriend goes to try to find him, and she eventually does and finds out what happens to him. So this one, I gotta be honest, there's like shapeshifters and stuff in here. It's not typically what I would like, but Clive Barker is such a fantastic writer, and to be honest, this made it to my list from one character in the book and the movie. There's one character, The Mask, and he's a man who carries around a briefcase, and in the briefcase is a mask that he puts on before he kills people, and the mask always tells him like, hey, put me on, you know you want to. It's seriously one of the best characters ever, so I honestly feel like this book is worth reading just for that character. If you're not into like shapeshifters and monster people and stuff, maybe skip this one, but if you want to give it a read, then I would say why not. It is, it's not a super long book or anything, and I thought it was quite entertaining. The next one that I read was Red Dragon. So this, of course, is about, I forget even the lead investigator's name, Will Graham. So Will is trying to catch Francis Dollarhide. I mean, you guys probably know the story of Red Dragon, but Hannibal Lecter's like barely in it. It's super well written. It's pretty much exactly like the book. You definitely get more background on Francis Dollarhide than you do in the movie. I still prefer Silence of the Lambs more than Red Dragon. It's like Silence of the Lambs, Red Dragon, and then halfway around the world there's Hannibal. I did really like this one. I thought it was a good read. So if you guys haven't read this, I suggest reading this and then Silence of the Lambs. You can skip over Hannibal if you don't want the whole series to kind of be ruined. Next up, we have Paul Tremblay's The Cabin at the End of the World. This is a really interesting story about a married couple and their daughter who go stay at a cabin, and there are people who end up coming into the cabin, tying them up, and telling them that the end of the world will come if one of them doesn't willingly sacrifice the other. And so they show their proof of what is to come or what's happening in the world if they don't do what they say. And the whole time you're just like, will the couple believe them? Will they not? What's going to happen next? Is the world really ending? It is really an interesting, well-written story. It's in present tense, so you kind of go along with the action, you know, of the characters. You're like there with them. Fantastically written book. Paul Tremblay is a fantastic author, but if you do not like ambiguity, stay away from this guy. Highly recommend. Although I will say, if you're going to pick up any Paul Tremblay book, A Head Full of Ghosts I think is much creepier than this one. This one's just kind of like a fun story to read. Still horror and stuff, but I still prefer A Head Full of Ghosts, but this one was the best one that I read this year. Next up, we have The Girl on the Train. This is Paula Hawkins. This is about a woman whose life is kind of falling apart. She's recently been divorced from her husband. She had to move out of the beautiful house that they lived in. She has a drinking problem. She kind of isolates and she's kind of losing a lot of her friends and nobody really respects her. And she takes the train to work every day and it stops at a point where she can see the house that she used to live in with her husband. And lo and behold, there is another couple who has moved in there and it's like this beautiful couple. And she becomes a little kind of obsessive over them, just imagining their life together every time she sees them. When she reads a newspaper and finds out that the woman who lived in the house has gone missing, she realizes that she might be able to provide a little bit of insight to the police because she's been watching the couple forever and she may have seen something a little odd happening. So she kind of inserts herself into the missing persons case a little too aggressively. She's not really a reliable source. She's always drinking. You know, her career is kind of coming to an end. Her life is falling apart. So nobody really believes her, but she really just wants to, I don't know, I guess feel control over something and like help this woman who has gone missing. It's honestly a really, really good book. I really enjoyed this and I think they made it into 1 or 2 movies, I think recently. I haven't seen them yet, but let me know if you guys have. I'm not sure if they're good, but the book, fantastic. Next up, I read Sophocles Antigone. So this is obviously a Greek tragedy, but I'm telling you guys, if you want a really intense horror story, read a Greek tragedy. This is part of the Oedipus cycle. I just wanted to reread Antigone this year. So it's a story of a war, and Antigone's brother ended up actually going on the opposite side and fighting against their side. The king tells her and everybody that nobody can bury him. He has to just lie out because he betrayed them. And he died. I don't know if I mentioned that. Antigone goes against his wish and buries her brother, and just all hell breaks loose from there. Honestly, Greek mythologies just get to me in a way that horror stories like can't even touch. You know, they are so tragic and bloody and intense. So I highly recommend picking up, I mean, honestly, any Greek tragedy and reading it if you guys love horror stories and kind of want to see, I don't know, I feel like where the horror genre kind of began. They are really fantastic to read, so I read that one this year. Next up, I read Dean Koontz's Mr. Murder. I talked about this in my last video, so if you watched that one and you're watching this one, sorry, but this is about a man named Marty who is a horror writer. There's also another man who's an assassin who looks just like Marty, and Marty feels like something terrible is going to happen, and the assassin feels like he's missing something in his life, and the assassin comes to find Marty, has his face, and realizes that Marty stole his life and that's why he feels so empty. So he tries to destroy Marty and get his life back. That's what the whole story is about. And honestly, I said in my last video, it reminded me of the Wes Craven book, which I did actually wanted to add here. I don't even remember what it's called. I think my friend is borrowing it because I scoured my bookshelves and could not find it. But this is what it looks like. I can't even remember the title. But this one is fantastic too, and it's, I feel like, along the same lines. If you've read one, you'll really enjoy the other. The Wes Craven book is about a man who gets abducted. They like planned his death so it looks like he died, but his girlfriend is kind of on to them. She follows all of these clues to lead to the secret island, and she comes to find out that it's like part of a government section where they're doing some stuff that's not quite good. I don't know. I don't obviously want to give too much away, but they are very similar, and that one I feel like is a lot more like adventure. They're both science fiction-y, but fantastically written, and I do highly recommend both. Those two were two of my favorite books that I read this year, certainly. Next up, we have Books of Blood by Clive Barker. Okay, you guys know Clive Barker has to be in here 18 times. So I read Books of Blood 1. I've been kind of jumping around because they're just a bunch of short stories. But at the end of the year, I was like, I gotta read a whole one. So these are the stories that are in Books of Blood. The first one, called The Book of Blood, is actually part of the movie The Books of Blood, the last little bit of that one, because it's kind of like an anthology where there are different stories linked together. That one is based on this one, and they did, I think, a pretty good job bringing the story to life. There's also Midnight Meat Train in here, which is also a film. Honestly, I watched that movie so long ago, but I remember it being quite different than the book. other than like there's a butcher who's like kills people on the subway, but it is quite different. But I wanted to read you a quote from here. He's talking about New York City and how when he first arrived at the city he was like in lust with it, but then he realized like, ew, it's just New York City. It says, New York was just a city. He had seen her wake up in the morning like a slut and picked murder men from between her teeth and suicides from the tangles of her hair. Clive Barker is just a literary genius. I absolutely love him, and if you guys haven't picked up a Clive Barker book and you love horror, honestly, I could not recommend him enough. He is fantastic. So honestly, any book from him will be great. Okay, so this next one, honestly just more so surprised me at how much I enjoyed the story. I'd never heard of this before. It's called Shadow Man by Dennis Etcheson, and it's about these children that keep disappearing and then popping up murdered, and all the children are terrified, and they keep saying that it's do they call him the Shadow Man? I thought they called him like the Sandman or something, but yeah, I guess, yeah, so they're terrified of this this like shadow man that's abducting children, and so a lot of kids are running away to this like children's facility to be kept safe because they don't even feel safe at their homes. And so the woman that works at that facility, along with a few other people, kind of try to get to the bottom of it. It's one of those like, is this paranormal or is this not kind of stories. I really enjoyed this. Like, this story honestly blew me away. For a $3 book that I'd never heard about my used bookstore, I was like, this is fantastic. So I really did enjoy this one. This was one of the books that just surprised me this year. Maybe not the best horror book I've ever read, and definitely some of these I would say were more of my favorite, but if you see this at a used bookstore for $1 or $2, I would highly recommend it because I had a lot of fun reading this. So those were my favorite books that I read this year. I hope that I provided you with some ideas of good books to read. Please let me know what your favorite horror book that you read this year was. You guys always leave me just the best recommendations, and I have a whole list of books to try to find because of you guys. But thank you so much for watching, and I will see you next time with another horror video. Bye guys!